Part 1. What are parallel lives? Imagine standing at a crossroads. In front of you stretch 1,000 paths, each leading to a different version of your life. One where you chose a different career. One where you never met your best friend. One where you moved to another country. Or one where you simply turned left instead of right on an ordinary Tuesday. Now imagine that every one of those paths actually exists, not as ideas, but as real living experiences happening simultaneously in parallel versions of reality. This is the essence of parallel lives. Unlike traditional reincarnation, which follows a linear path life, death, rebirth, parallel lives suggest that you, the soul, are experiencing multiple realities at the same time. You may be living this current life as a teacher in New York, while another version of you is an artist in Spain, a monk in Tibet, or even a version that never made it past childhood. These are not just hypothetical to many spiritual traditions and emerging scientific theories. These are actual ongoing timelines. But how is that possible? To understand this, we need to look at both the mystical and the scientific. Let's begin with the spiritual perspective. In many esoteric traditions, including ancient Egyptian, Tibetan, and indigenous teachings, the soul is not seen as a single static unit. Instead, the soul is multifaceted, capable of expressing itself in many forms at once. Some describe this using the concept of soul fragmentation, where one higher soul, also called an oversoul, divides parts of itself to explore different experiences in different realities. From this view, you are not just you. You are one thread in a vast web of experiences, part of a greater soul seeking understanding, mastery, and expansion through the lens of many lives. This idea is echoed in the Akashic Records, a mystical concept described as an energetic library that holds the memory of every soul's journey across all lifetimes, dimensions, and possibilities. According to Akashic practitioners, when you access this field, you may not only view past lives, but also parallel ones, some similar, some wildly different, all coexisting now. Some spiritual teachers describe it as a diamond, with many facets, each facet reflecting light differently, but all part of the same jewel. Others say your soul is playing a symphony across timelines. You're just hearing one instrument right now. Interestingly, modern physics has a theory that closely mirrors these spiritual insights. It's called the many worlds interpretation, MWI, first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. According to MWI, every time a decision is made at the quantum level, reality splits. In one version, the particle goes left, in another, it goes right. Extrapolate that upward, and it means that every choice, every possibility spawns a new universe. For example, when you chose to watch this video today, perhaps in another universe you didn't. In that other timeline, your day unfolded differently, and so did the chain of consequences that followed. To us, these splits are invisible. But quantum physics suggests they're not only real, they're infinite. There are versions of the universe where dinosaurs never went extinct. Versions where you married your high school sweetheart. Versions where humanity lives on Mars. And versions where you made just a small different choice that changed everything. This may sound like science fiction, but it's taken seriously in theoretical physics, and it raises a profound question. If these other realities exist, can we sense them? Here's where science and spirituality begin to meet consciousness. In quantum theory, observation affects reality. Particles behave differently when they're being observed. That implies that our awareness plays an active role in shaping the world around us. Some scientists and mystics alike believe that consciousness is non-local, meaning it is not confined to the brain or even to the specific body. Rather, consciousness might be like a radio signal. Your body is just one receiver tuned to one frequency. But there are other receivers, other versions of you, tuned to different frequencies in the same field. When people experience déjà vu, intense dreams, or sudden flashes of memory that don't belong to this life, they might be tuning into one of those parallel frequencies. That's why you can sometimes feel the life of another version of you, a bleed through from a nearby reality. The veil between these lives is thinner than we think. And some people, especially those who meditate, dream deeply, or practice spiritual techniques, may pierce that veil more often than they realize. It's important to make a distinction here. Past lives follow a linear model of time. You lived in 1700, then 1800, then 2000. Your soul reincarnates to learn lessons over time. Parallel lives, however, reject linearity. They propose that all time exists simultaneously, what Einstein called the illusion of past, present, and future. So while you're watching this video in 2025, another you might be fighting in a war in the 1500s, and another might be living in a futuristic society 300 years from now, all happening now in different timelines. From this view, time isn't a line, it's a sphere or a web. You as a soul are the spider in the center, feeling the vibrations from every thread. And here's the wildest part, choices you make here may ripple into those other timelines, and vice versa. So what if parallel lives exist? Why should we care? Because your deepest feelings, fears, and instincts may not come only from your current life. That strange fear of drowning. Maybe another version of you did. That instant connection with someone you just met. Maybe your souls are lovers in another realm. That recurring dream of a war-torn city. Maybe it's not just a dream. Maybe it's a memory from a parallel you. Understanding this opens a new way to view healing, growth, and spiritual awakening. Instead of thinking, what happened to me, we might begin to ask, what is also happening across my soul's other journeys that I'm feeling now? When you heal something here, a trauma, a pattern of fear, you may also be healing it across timelines. And when you ignore it, the pain may echo louder from other versions of you, calling for attention. Part 2, signs you're affected by a parallel life. Most people go through life unaware that another version of themselves may be shaping their current reality. But there are signs, sometimes subtle, sometimes overwhelming, that suggest you are not just living one life, but that you are entangled in a web of experiences across timelines. These signs are not always dramatic. Often they appear in the form of recurring emotions, irrational fears, unexplained talents, or even an intuitive sense that you were meant to do something else, be someone else, or live somewhere else. Let's explore the most common signs that your current life is being influenced by a parallel one. The first and most widely recognized is the phenomenon of déjà vu. Most people have experienced this eerie sensation, a moment when you feel like you've been in a situation before, even though logically it's impossible. You walk into a room you've never entered and feel as if everything, the smell, the lighting, the mood is intimately familiar. Science often attributes déjà vu to misfired brain signals, but some spiritual thinkers believe it is a bleed-through from a parallel life, one where you did in fact have this exact moment. In that timeline, you've already been here. The feeling of recognition is not memory, but resonance, the echo of another you experiencing the same moment in a different version of reality. Another powerful indicator is the presence of innate talents or abilities that you have never practiced or studied. Perhaps you pick up a musical instrument for the first time and instinctively know where your fingers should go. Maybe you can draw, dance, speak a foreign language, or understand complex mathematical ideas without formal training. This phenomenon is especially curious in children, some of whom show extraordinary skills at ages when training or practice would be impossible. One theory suggests that these talents are not inherited genetically but energetically from other versions of the self who have mastered these disciplines. In a parallel life, you are a concert pianist, an architect, a scientist, and somehow those memories imprinted in the soul leak into this version. Equally telling are irrational fears and phobias. You may have a deep fear of heights, drowning, fire, or even tight spaces despite never having had a traumatic experience related to those things. You may find yourself inexplicably panicking in situations that others consider completely normal. Where does this fear come from? Some psychologists link it to subconscious trauma, but those who work with past life regression or multidimensional healing believe these are emotional residues from parallel selves, versions of you that experienced a death or trauma so powerful it imprinted on the shared soul. You in this timeline inherit the emotional scar without the story. Then there is the phenomenon of instant connection, the magnetic pull you feel towards someone you've just met. It may be romantic, but not always. Sometimes it's a feeling of family, of recognition, of ancient familiarity. You meet someone and feel as if you've known them forever. You trust them without question. You may even finish each other's sentences or sense their feelings without speaking. While some call this chemistry or intuition, others believe it's evidence that your souls are entangled across timelines. Perhaps in another life, you were lovers, siblings, comrades, or even rivals. The bond formed there transcends time and seeps into the now, drawing you together again in different roles and different stories, but with the same energetic thread. There are also signs that are far more subtle, such as the persistent feeling that you're living the wrong life. You might feel like you've missed something important, even though your life seems normal on the surface. This existential restlessness is not depression. It's more like a haunting. You may feel drawn to places you've never been nostalgic for, times you never lived in, or obsessed with cultures that have no connection to your background. You may look up at the stars and feel homesick for a world you can't name. This displacement could be your soul reminding you that other versions of you exist thriving or suffering in realities where your choices were different. It's not that you made a mistake. It's that you're aware consciously or unconsciously of other possible lives calling out to you. Sometimes people experience this bleed through in dreams. You may dream vividly of a life that doesn't belong to you, different friends, different surroundings, different personality. But everything feels more real than your waking life. Some describe it as waking up in someone else's life while dreaming. Others report recurring dreams of the same alternate life, continuing night after night, like episodes in a series. These are not random constructs of the mind, some believe, but actual glimpses into your parallel experiences, windows into the you that lives elsewhere. Another sign comes through emotional flashbacks or sudden unexplainable grief. You might walk down a street and be overwhelmed by sadness with no logical source. You might hold an object and burst into tears without knowing why. These moments are sometimes triggered by places, song smells, or even weather. From a multidimensional view, these are emotional echoes, waves traveling across timelines, stirring something deep within your soul. That sadness may not belong to this life, but it belongs to a part of you. In some cases, people report spontaneous memories that are not dreams, hallucinations, or imagined fantasies. They remember events, people, or environments that they have never encountered in this life. These flashes often come during meditation, extreme stress, or moments of emotional vulnerability. Some call them visions. Others consider them evidence of parallel identities surfacing briefly like a radio, briefly tuning into another frequency before returning to normal. Then there is a final sign harder to define, but unmistakable once felt the sense that reality itself is shifting. You may wake up one day and feel that the world is slightly off. Your memories may not match those of others. You recall events that supposedly never happened. People you remember vividly claim not to have met you. Or your environment changes subtly. Objects misplaced, street names altered, familiar places feeling wrong. Some dismiss this as false memory, while others reference the Mandela effect to explain collective timeline shifts. But in the context of parallel lives, these shifts may be evidence of your consciousness transitioning momentarily or permanently into another version of reality where things unfolded just slightly differently. All these signs point to one idea: your consciousness is not confined to this version of reality. You are a multidimensional being, living out countless expressions across space and time. Sometimes those expressions overlap. Sometimes they whisper to each other through emotion, memory, fear, or love. The influence is not random, it is purposeful. Your soul is learning, healing, evolving across these timelines, and what you feel now may not be yours alone. The awareness of this influence can be both empowering and disorienting. It challenges the idea that we are linear, isolated beings. It opens the door to greater empathy, not just for others, but for the many selves that reside within us. And it invites us to ask a deeper question: if I am being influenced by my other lives, how can I respond consciously? Can I learn from them? Can I heal for them? Can I align with the version of me that is thriving, courageous, and free? These are the questions we will begin to explore in the next section. For if you are already being shaped by unseen lives, then it is not a leap to imagine that you can also shape them in return. Part 3. Real stories and testimonies. Throughout history and across cultures, countless individuals have shared vivid, often inexplicable experiences that suggest they are remembering or accessing lives they never lived, at least not in this timeline. These stories emerge in therapy rooms in spontaneous moments of awakening in near-death experiences and during spiritual journeys. They are often dismissed or labeled as imagination delusion or dream residue. Yet when collected and studied across a wide sample, they form a compelling mosaic of evidence that something far deeper is at work. These are not isolated incidents. They are signs that human consciousness is far more complex, multidimensional, and interconnected than we have assumed. Take, for instance, the groundbreaking work of Dr. Brian Weiss, a psychiatrist who stumbled upon past life memories while conducting hypnotherapy. In his book, Many Lives, Many Masters, Weiss recounts the story of a patient named Catherine, who under hypnosis began to describe scenes, people, and experiences from what appeared to be other lifetimes, some hundreds or even thousands of years ago. She spoke of different names, foreign languages, ancient clothing, and events she could not possibly have learned from books or television. What startled Dr. Weiss even more was that after reliving these experiences, Catherine's chronic phobias and emotional trauma began to dissolve. He had not intended to discover past lives, but what he encountered led him to believe that the soul's journey is far from linear and that memory may span multiple lifetimes running in parallel. Catherine's story is far from unique. Since Weiss's revelations, thousands of therapists worldwide have used regression techniques to explore not just past lives but alternate versions of the self. Some report clients accessing lifetimes in ancient civilizations, others in futuristic worlds, and still others in contemporary realities that are slightly different, subtle changes in geography, technology, or political history. These accounts often come with intense emotion, physical responses, and a lasting psychological effect. What's most fascinating is how these memories often bring clarity to current life challenges, revealing patterns of behavior, relationship dynamics, or unexplained anxieties that originate not from this life, but from elsewhere in the soul's experience. Children, too, are a source of remarkable testimony. In studies conducted by Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, over 2 to 500 cases were documented in which young children claimed to remember previous lives. These were not vague stories. Many children gave detailed descriptions of people, places, and events that were later verified through research. In one famous case, a young boy in India insisted he had been murdered in a past life and even led investigators to the exact village home and murder weapon, none of which he had access to in this life. In another, an American toddler named James Leininger began having violent nightmares about a plane crash. He told his parents with disturbing specificity about being a pilot in World War II, named the aircraft carrier he flew from, and even recognized fellow soldiers from photos taken decades before his birth. James's parents, initially skeptical, were stunned when historical records confirmed every detail. While some call this reincarnation, others argue that what we are seeing may be even more complex, that these memories belong not to a previous life, but to a simultaneous one, and the child's consciousness is momentarily accessing a parallel stream. Near-death experiences provide another doorway into the realm of parallel lives. People who have clinically died and returned often report extraordinary visions, while some describe floating above their body or moving through tunnels of light. Others speak of entering entirely different realities, worlds that felt more real than anything on Earth. Some met versions of themselves living completely different lives. A woman in Sweden, for example, said she visited a world where she never divorced her husband and was living peacefully with 3 children she did not have in this life. The emotional bond with these children was so strong that she cried upon waking, feeling as if she had left part of her soul behind. Another man who nearly drowned reported being in a city where everything was made of crystal and energy, and where he had a different name, a different occupation, and spoke a language unknown to him, but somehow understood. He described the experience as more real than real, and it left him with a sense that he was not just one man, but many. Indigenous traditions have long acknowledged these multidimensional realities. In Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, the present is deeply intertwined with the ancestral past and the parallel dream world. Shamans in Amazonian and Siberian tribes have for centuries spoken of journeying into other lives through ritual, trance, and plant medicine. In these states, they encounter not only spirits and guides, but often alternate versions of themselves: warriors, healers, sages, and even versions who failed to fulfill their purpose. These experiences are treated not as hallucinations, but as sacred truths essential to personal and communal healing. The boundary between worlds is not seen as rigid, but permeable, navigable through intention and spiritual discipline. In the modern era, many individuals report spontaneous experiences of timeline shifting, often triggered by emotional trauma, intense meditation, or liminal states between waking and sleeping. One woman described waking up one morning to find subtle but undeniable changes in her life. The layout of her apartment was slightly different. The street outside had an unfamiliar name, and certain personal memories no longer matched her partner's recollection. Though psychologically stable, she was overcome with a sense that she had slipped into a different version of reality. Over time, she adjusted, but she never shook the feeling that the original version of her life still existed just out of reach. Stories like these are often dismissed by mainstream science as confabulations or psychological coping mechanisms. But the sheer volume, consistency, and emotional intensity of these experiences suggests something deeper. When so many people across cultures, ages, and belief systems report similar phenomena, it challenges the reductionist view of consciousness as a byproduct of the brain. It hints at a model where the mind is not confined to this body, this life, or this timeline. Instead, it may be a trans-temporal multidimensional field capable of perceiving and integrating experiences far beyond the ordinary limits of perception. It's worth noting that not all encounters with parallel lives are dramatic or mystical. Sometimes they occur quietly in the form of artistic inspiration, intuitive insight, or sudden behavioral shifts. A man who never wrote poetry might, after a profound dream, begin composing verses as if channeling another part of himself. A woman who has always feared water might find peace after imagining herself as a sailor in another life. These subtle transformations, while harder to quantify, often lead to powerful shifts in how people view themselves, their relationships, and their sense of purpose. In gathering these stories, whether from trained therapists, scientific researchers, spiritual guides, or ordinary people, it becomes clear that something extraordinary is happening beneath the surface of our everyday awareness. The human experience may not be a single line, but a constellation. And in that constellation, every story, every dream, every strange pull of the heart may be a star that points to another life, a life not behind us or ahead of us, but running alongside us even now. As we move into the next part of this journey, we will look deeper into the science that underpins these possibilities. What if modern physics has already given us the tools to understand how these parallel realities operate? What if the mysteries of the soul and the equations of the universe are not in opposition, but two languages describing the same profound truth? Part 4, the science of split realities. For generations, science and spirituality have been placed on opposing ends of human understanding. One appeals to logic, repeatable evidence, and material proof. The other leans into mystery, inner experience, and the unseen. But in recent decades, something curious has happened. The more we investigate the nature of reality at the quantum level, the more our findings begin to resemble the teachings of ancient mystics. Concepts that once belonged solely to shamans and sages are now being discussed in physics labs and academic journals. And nowhere is this convergence more apparent than in the study of parallel realities. The foundation of modern science rests on Newtonian physics, a mechanical, predictable model where cause leads to effect and the universe behaves like a clock. In this view, time moves in a straight line. Reality is singular. The observer is separate from the observed. But in the 20th century, quantum mechanics shattered this certainty. At the subatomic level, particles don't behave like tidy building blocks. They act like possibilities. They exist in superposition, meaning they can occupy multiple states at once, only collapsing into one form when measured or observed. This phenomenon led to one of the most provocative ideas in physics, the many worlds interpretation first proposed by Hugh Everett in 1977. According to this model, every time a quantum event occurs with multiple possible outcomes, the universe doesn't choose one, it splits. All outcomes happen, but in separate branching realities. So in one timeline, you took the job. In another, you didn't. In one, you said yes. In another, you walked away. Each of these choices bursts a distinct but parallel world, each as real as the one you inhabit now. This may sound fantastical, but the math supports it. Quantum mechanics is notoriously accurate in its predictions. It's not fringe science, it's the backbone of modern technology, from semiconductors to lasers to MRI machines. The question is not whether particles behave this way, they demonstrably do, but whether these behaviors scale up into something we can feel, sense, or remember. And that's where consciousness enters the discussion. In classical physics, consciousness is irrelevant. The universe runs whether you're aware of it or not. But in quantum theory, the act of observation plays a central role. The famous double-slit experiment shows that particles behave differently when they are being watched. Without observation, they exist in a wave-like state of probabilities. But the moment an observer enters the equation, the wave collapses into a specific measurable event. This leads to a radical implication: consciousness affects reality, not as a metaphor, but as a measurable, repeatable phenomenon. If the observer changes the observed, then consciousness is not just a passive passenger, it's an active participant. This has led some physicists and philosophers to suggest that consciousness may not be produced by the brain at all, but rather filtered through it. In this view, the brain is not the origin of awareness, but the tuner of it, much like a radio receives a signal. Your current self is tuned into one frequency, but countless others exist broadcasting in parallel. This brings us to the concept of non-local consciousness, a theory gaining traction among both neuroscientists and mystics. Non-locality means that consciousness is not limited to a single point in space or time. It may extend across timelines, dimensions, or realities. This would explain why some people have sudden insights, psychic impressions, or memories that don't belong to their present life. Their consciousness may be momentarily overlapping with another version of themselves existing simultaneously elsewhere. Neuroscience also offers intriguing clues. Studies of the brain reveal that memory is not stored in a single location, but distributed across multiple networks. And these networks are far more malleable than once believed. Trauma, for example, can alter not just memory, but perception, changing the way we interpret present moment reality. If trauma can stretch our sense of time and identity, what's to say other factors like parallel experience don't do the same? There are also reports of memory anomalies where people remember events, products, or historical facts differently from the accepted version. Some attribute this to faulty memory, but when large groups share the same alternate memory, the phenomenon becomes more difficult to dismiss. This has been dubbed the Mandela effect, after many people recalled Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, despite historical records showing he was released and later became president. Other examples include alternate spellings of brand names, movie lines, or historical events. One possible explanation is that these individuals have shifted timelines subtly but significantly and are now carrying memories from a slightly different version of reality. Further supporting this idea is the theory of quantum entanglement, which Einstein famously called spooky action at a distance. When two particles become entangled, a change in one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are in space. If entanglement can occur between particles, could something similar happen between versions of a person across timelines? Could the emotional shock in one life ripple into another, creating irrational fear, déjà vu, or an unexplained longing? If souls or consciousness fields are entangled across lives, it would explain why healing in one area often produces changes in another, even when no logical connection exists. While mainstream science is cautious, more researchers are exploring these frontiers. Cognitive scientists are studying altered states of consciousness to better understand how perception shapes experience. Psychedelic research has returned to prominence, revealing that substances like psilocybin and DMT can temporarily dissolve the boundaries of time, self, and reality. Users often report encountering versions of themselves, reliving other lives, or experiencing profound truths that are both personal and universal. Are these chemical illusions, or are they brief glimpses beyond the veil of singularity? Philosophers, too, are engaging with these questions. Thinkers like David Deutsch, Max Tegmark, and Carlo Rovelli have proposed models of reality that embrace the multiverse, information-based physics, and loop time. These are not spiritual gurus, but respected physicists publishing peer-reviewed work. They suggest that the fabric of reality may be far stranger than we can comprehend, and that what we call one life may just be a single thread in a much larger tapestry of being. And if we return to the level of personal experience, the theory becomes even more compelling. People around the world report spontaneous, knowing, inexplicable behavior, intuitive decisions, and deeply felt emotions that have no source in their current biography. A man walks into a city he's never visited and knows every street. A woman meets a stranger and feels the grief of a lost lover. These are not mere psychological quirks. They may be signals, traces of a multidimensional self echoing through the walls of reality. The question is no longer whether parallel lives exist. The question is how conscious we are of them. How often do we brush up against the edges of other realities without realizing it? How many decisions are shaped not only by what we've lived, but by what other versions of us are living right now? Science may not yet have all the tools to measure these experiences, but the frontier is moving. What was once fantasy is becoming theoretical. What was once anecdotal is becoming repeatable. And what was once mystical is becoming measurable. Part 5. How parallel lives influence your present decisions. If you've ever found yourself standing at a decision point in life and feeling an inexplicable pull, one that logic can't explain and that no past experience fully accounts for, then you may have already felt the influence of a parallel self. We often think of decision-making as a purely rational process, weighing pros and cons, projecting outcomes, choosing the best option. But more often than not, our decisions are guided by something else: instinct, emotion, or an inner knowing that defies reason. What if that intuition is not just personal, but multidimensional? What if it's a signal from another version of you who's already walked the path you're about to choose? One of the most common ways parallel lives influence our present is through recurring patterns. You might notice yourself caught in the same kinds of relationships, the same cycles of success and sabotage, or the same emotional reactions no matter how much you try to change. These patterns are often dismissed as psychological habits or unconscious programming. But in many spiritual frameworks, they are understood as energetic imprints, resonances from other lives where similar events played out, sometimes with painful endings. When unresolved, these echoes can bleed into the present, creating emotional inertia that makes us feel stuck, no matter how many times we try to start fresh. The soul remembers more than we realize. And when it comes to repeated pain or unmet longing, those memories can shape how we react to new opportunities. Imagine, for example, that in one timeline, you love someone deeply, but they betrayed you. In this life, you meet someone who reminds you subconsciously of that person. Despite having no reason to distrust them, you feel guarded, anxious, or unworthy. Or perhaps in another version of your life, you followed a dream and lost everything. In this timeline, you're presented with the same dream, but fear holds you back. That fear may not come from experience here, but from a cautionary echo elsewhere. It doesn't mean the outcome will be the same, but the emotional imprint still lives in your energetic field, influencing your choices in subtle, persistent ways. Sometimes the influence is not limiting, but inspiring. People report sudden waves of courage, clarity, or strength that feel out of character, as if they've tapped into a version of themselves who is fearless, powerful, or wise. These moments often arise in crisis: a woman finding superhuman calm during an accident, a man trusting a gut feeling that leads to a life-saving decision, or an artist suddenly breaking through years of creative block with a completely new style. These breakthroughs may be more than internal change. They may represent a momentary merger, a brief alignment with a parallel self who has already mastered what this version struggles with. In the world of soul contracts and karmic blueprints, it's believed that we often reincarnate with similar souls across lifetimes. These connections are not limited to the past. Some spiritual teachers propose that you and your loved ones may also exist together in multiple parallel realities, each exploring different outcomes. In one version, you may be siblings. In another, strangers. In a third, you may be married. The emotional intensity you feel towards certain people may arise from this web of shared experience. And sometimes decisions in one life ripple outward, causing changes in others. For example, if you finally break a toxic relationship pattern in this life, you may energetically liberate another version of yourself who is still caught in it. Conversely, when you resist your growth, you may feel the weight of unresolved pain that isn't entirely yours, but is still part of your larger soul field. This interconnectedness becomes especially apparent when people describe the sensation of being pulled in multiple directions, an inner tug-of-war between logic and longing, fear and desire, obligation and intuition. From a multidimensional view, this conflict may arise because different versions of you are choosing different paths. One self may want to stay, another longs to go, one clings to security, another hungers for freedom. You are not broken or indecisive. You are feeling the vibrational tension between timelines, each with its own gravity. Learning to listen not just to your thoughts, but to your energetic responses becomes essential. Your body often knows, before your mind does, which path is aligned with your highest self. Some researchers and healers use the term timeline alignment to describe the process of choosing to merge with the version of yourself that is living in harmony, abundance, love, or purpose. This is not a fantasy. It's a deliberate act of energetic orientation. Through meditation, visualization, and inner work, you can identify the version of yourself that feels most alive, most authentic, and begin to embody their choices. This is not about wishing for a better life. It's about attuning to the vibration of that life and choosing step by step to live it. Each decision becomes a vote for that reality. Of course, this influence goes both ways. Just as other versions of you can shape your life, your choices now can influence them. When you heal an old wound, make a courageous choice or a step into your power. You create ripples across the field of your soul. You become the strong one, the healed one, the guide. You contribute to the collective growth of all yourselves. In this way, you are not only responsible for your own journey, you are a participant in the evolution of your entire soul family across timelines. Every choice you make with awareness becomes an act of multidimensional healing. Even seemingly small decisions carry weight. Choosing kindness over revenge, authenticity over performance, truth over comfort. These are not just moral choices. They are energetic declarations. Each one opens a new timeline or strengthens an existing one. Each one signals to the universe which version of yourself you are committed to becoming. The more conscious your decisions become, the more aligned your life becomes, not just in this reality, but in all realities. It's also worth noting that resistance to certain paths may be a form of inner wisdom. Not all timelines are healthy. Not all versions of you are whole. Some are wounded, lost, or stuck in fear. When you feel a deep internal no, a full-bodied resistance that logic cannot explain, it may be your soul protecting you from aligning with a version of reality that does not serve your highest growth. Trusting that resistance can be as powerful as trusting your desire. Both are messages from the deeper field of your being. As your awareness expands, you begin to sense these influences more clearly. Your choices become less reactive and more intuitive. You stop asking only, what do I want, and start asking, what version of me do I want to become, and which timeline supports that version? This shift in consciousness transforms decision-making from a process of fear and control into one of trust and creative power. It reclaims your agency not just as a character in one story, but as a co-creator across many. In the end, perhaps we are not meant to fully understand the architecture of reality. Perhaps we are meant to feel our way through it, guided by resonance, nudges, dreams, and the quiet voice that whispers, you are more than this moment. You are a network of possibility, a living intersection of lives seen and unseen. And every choice you make sends a signal not just to your future, but to all the futures you carry within. Part 6, Dreams, Visions, and Altered States. Every night we fall into a world where the rules of waking life no longer apply. In our dreams, we fly without wings, speak languages we've never studied, and interact with people we've never met yet somehow deeply recognize. While mainstream psychology often explains dreams as the brain's way of processing memory, stress, or subconscious desires, many spiritual traditions and an increasing number of consciousness researchers suggest a far more radical idea. Dreams are not just mental simulations. They are doorways. And what lies beyond those doors may be glimpses into parallel lives. Lucid dreaming is perhaps the clearest example. In a lucid dream, the dreamer becomes aware that they are dreaming and can often control the dream environment. This state of consciousness is not simply fantasy, it is a waking mind inside a sleeping body. But what's fascinating is that many lucid dreamers report accessing entire lives within their dreams, relationships that span years, knowledge they've never acquired, and experiences that feel more real than waking life. Some describe returning to the same dream world night after night, continuing stories as if they're living another existence. These dream realms have consistent geography, recurring characters, and emotional continuity. If these were merely mental constructs, why would they persist and evolve independently of the dreamer's conscious mind? Some spiritual teachers believe that in lucid dreams, the veil between realities thins, allowing us to enter alternate versions of ourselves. These are not symbolic projections, but parallel timelines that exist alongside our own. In this view, when you become lucid, you are not dreaming, you are remembering. Beyond lucid dreams, there are spontaneous dreams that bring forward intense emotional reactions. Dreams where the dreamer wakes up in tears, joy, or with a sense of deep grief or loss. These dreams often involve people, places, or events that feel profoundly meaningful, even though they have no reference point in waking life. A woman dreams of a child she's never had and wakes with a maternal longing that stays for days. A man dreams of dying in battle and wakes with wounds that feel fresh and real. These dreams may be more than emotional metaphors. They may be actual moments lived by other versions of the self echoes crossing timelines through the medium of sleep. Some dreams are even more surreal, standing in cities made of light, speaking with beings of indescribable form, witnessing the earth from above, or experiencing time in reverse. While such visions are often categorized as archetypal or mystical, others argue they represent the mind stepping out of its habitual frequency and tuning into the greater field of consciousness. In these moments, we are not escaping in reality, we are expanding into it. Altered states induced by meditation, trance breathwork, or even plant medicine often produce similar effects. People report encountering themselves in different forms: a healer in ancient Egypt, a child on another planet, a monk in the mountains of Tibet. These encounters are not always symbolic. Many people describe them as emotionally charged, vividly detailed, and deeply transformative. They return from these experiences with insights that change their waking life, healing traumas, discovering new purpose, or making radical changes in behavior. The sense of authenticity in these altered states is often stronger than what they feel in waking life. This suggests that what they experienced wasn't imagined, it was remembered. Psychedelic experiences, particularly with substances like DMT, ayahuasca, or psilocybin, have also opened new frontiers in understanding consciousness. Users often describe entering worlds of extraordinary complexity, meeting entities, revisiting past lives, or observing the birth and death of entire civilizations. While the mainstream view tends to treat these as hallucinations, some neuroscientists and quantum theorists propose that such substances may act like signal boosters, allowing the brain to access information beyond our normal perceptual limits. From this perspective, psychedelics do not generate new experiences. They reveal what was already there, what is always there, but usually inaccessible. Even without external catalysts, the boundary between waking and dreaming consciousness can blur. In hypnagogic and hypnopompic states, the transitional phases between waking and sleep, many people report hearing voices, seeing vivid scenes, or receiving intuitive messages. These states are often fertile ground for creativity, inspiration, and insight. Thomas Edison and Salvador Dali both used micronaps to enter these liminal states, claiming they helped them solve problems and access creative genius. It's possible that what they were doing was momentarily slipping into a nearby timeline, tapping into the intelligence of another version of themselves. Another phenomenon worth mentioning is soul travel, or astral projection, the sensation of leaving the physical body and moving through other realms. Practitioners of astral projection often describe visiting other planets, witnessing alternate Earths, or interacting with beings and environments that seem entirely real. Some even claim to encounter their own doppelgangers living other lives in other circumstances, sometimes completely unaware of their presence. While the validity of these experiences is debated, their consistency across cultures, ages, and backgrounds suggests they tap into something universal. Even visions that occur during moments of extreme trauma, like near-death experiences, often include elements of parallel life recall. People may see versions of themselves who took different paths or glimpse future or past lives playing out simultaneously. These experiences leave the person with a transformed view of time, identity, and purpose. They often return with the conviction that they are more than one life, more than oneself. What connects all these altered states is not just their content, but their emotional truth. Whether through dreams, meditation, plant medicine, or visionary insight, the person feels what they experience as real, sometimes more real than anything they've known. These experiences break the illusion of singularity. They show us that consciousness is not linear and that identity is not fixed. The self is a fluid constellation of memory, emotion, energy, and awareness spread across dimensions, times, and stories. Dreams are the language of the soul navigating that constellation. Altered states are the soul's way of remembering it. Rather than dismissing these experiences as delusion, perhaps we should ask a deeper question. Why does the mind generate such vivid, coherent, alternate lives unless some part of us has lived them? Or why do we return from these states changed, healed, or awakened unless something real occurred? What if these moments are not escapes from life, but reunions with it, a way to return to the greater field of who we truly are? Part 7, can you change the past in a parallel life? For most of us, the past feels untouchable. What's done is done. The choices made, the words spoken, the pain endured, these lie behind us, outside the reach of change. But if we entertain the possibility that time is not linear and that the soul exists across multiple dimensions simultaneously, then a radical truth emerges: the past may not be fixed. In fact, it may be just as fluid and responsive to consciousness as the present. And that means you might not only remember your other lives, you might also influence them. The idea of altering the past seems like science fiction, yet many ancient spiritual traditions and modern energy healing modalities suggest that the soul can indeed reach across timelines to send healing guidance and even transformation to its fragmented parts. This process doesn't necessarily mean reversing events. What's done in one timeline cannot be erased. But it does mean shifting the emotional charge and karmic weight of those events, changing how they live in your field and how they continue to influence you. One of the ways this happens is through a process some call quantum forgiveness. In this practice, you enter a deep meditative state, connect to a version of yourself that experienced pain or trauma, and extend to them compassion, understanding, and release. You might visualize yourself standing with that version, holding their hand, speaking the words they needed to hear, witnessing their pain without judgment. This form of inner work can be profoundly healing, not only for your current life, but across the soul's multidimensional tapestry. People often report a sudden lifting of emotional burdens, spontaneous changes in behavior, or resolution of patterns they've struggled with for years, all after working with a parallel or past self in this way. This is not just imagination. In the world of neuroscience, visualization is known to produce real neurological changes. When you vividly imagine yourself practicing a skill, the same neural pathways are activated as when you perform the skill physically. The body doesn't know the difference between imagined and experienced action at the neural level. What if the soul functions the same way? What if when you send love, compassion, or intention to another version of yourself, the energy truly reaches them? Because in a very real way, they are still alive and active in another stream of time. There are also spiritual practices centered around timeline healing, in which practitioners enter altered states and visit what they describe as past future echoes of their soul. These versions are often stuck in trauma loops, moments of loss, fear, abandonment, or failure that never resolved and continue to reverberate across timelines. By engaging with these echoes, offering light rewriting contracts, or even re-experiencing the moment with new choices, they report remarkable shifts in their present reality. Anxiety vanishes, relationships soften, physical ailments improve. The changes may seem mysterious from a linear point of view, but they make perfect sense if time is viewed as a sphere instead of a line, and healing in one area of the sphere ripples outward in all directions. Another powerful concept is entanglement of the soul. If different versions of you are connected energetically like quantum particles that influence each other across distance, then your inner growth now inevitably touches your other selves. Every time you choose truth over deception, love over resentment, forgiveness over bitterness, you strengthen a vibrational pathway that your other selves can follow. You become the lighthouse. And likewise, when you avoid growth or sink into self-abandonment, those lower frequency states may be reflected or even reinforced by versions of you living in parallel patterns of pain. This means that conscious healing is never isolated. When you sit in meditation and meet a younger version of yourself or a parallel version that never healed, you're doing sacred work across timelines. When you say you didn't deserve that, or you are worthy now, or it's not your fault, you're sending frequencies that may reach not only that inner child in your current life, but also the orphaned daughter in another life, the betrayed warrior in another era, the silent monk in another dimension. These are not metaphorical selves. They are expressions of you just as valid and vibrant as the self you now inhabit. People who engage deeply in this kind of work often describe dramatic shifts in their perception of time. They no longer view their life as a linear progression, but as a living, evolving field of possibility where their decisions, emotions, and intentions have real multidimensional consequences. Some even describe moments of timeline convergence where they feel their other selves moving closer, merging with their awareness. This is often accompanied by increased intuition, creative flow, synchronicity, and a sense of inner peace they can't quite explain. Meditation, breathwork, energy, healing, dream work, and Akashic field exploration and are all tools that can help facilitate this connection. The process does not require belief in any dogma. It only requires openness, curiosity, and the willingness to listen beyond the boundaries of the five senses. Often the soul speaks in emotion, symbol, and sensation more than in language. A deep sadness that arises out of nowhere. A sudden flash of a different life. A dream that won't let go. These are all invitations to go deeper. There are also more practical ways to engage in timeline healing. One is to write a letter not to someone else, but to a version of yourself that still needs closure. You might write to the part of you that never spoke up, never left, never said goodbye, or to the one who tried and failed and never forgave themselves. You don't have to send the letter anywhere, but in the act of writing, you create a vibrational bridge. The words become energy and energy travels. Another method is called timeline invocation, where you deliberately call in the energy of a version of yourself who has already healed, ready to succeed, and already chosen the higher path. You sit quietly, breathe deeply, and ask, what does that version of me feel like? What choices does that self make? How do they speak, think, move, live? Then you begin to live as if you are that version now. You align your body, mind, and heart to the frequency of the healed self. The shift can be subtle or sudden, but over time the external world responds. Doors open, people change, circumstances reconfigure around your inner alignment. None of this means we can bypass pain or magically erase consequences. But it does mean we are not prisoners of our past, not in this life, nor in any other. We are co-authors of a living text. In every page we rewrite in compassion, truth, and courage becomes a beacon for our other selves. What you do here matters everywhere. Part 8, how to access and learn from your parallel selves. If we accept that parallel versions of ourselves are not just theoretical possibilities, but living, breathing expressions of our soul in alternate realities, then the next logical question is, can we connect with them directly? Can we engage with them in ways that help us grow, heal, and evolve in the life we are currently living? The answer from many mystics, meditators, and consciousness explorers is yes, but not through logic or force. The key is alignment, intention, and subtle attention, because the gateway to parallel lives does not open through the intellect, but through presence. The first and most accessible method is guided visualization. This is not mere imagination. When practiced with sincerity and repetition, visualization can become a bridge between timelines. Begin by finding a quiet space where you can sit or lie undisturbed. Close your eyes, slow your breath, and allow your mind to drift. Now ask your inner self, show me the version of me who has already overcome what I'm struggling with. You may see an image, feel a sensation, or receive nothing at all the first few times. That's fine. Trust the process. Over time, a figure may appear, someone who looks like you, but radiates a different energy. Pay attention to their posture, their clothing, their environment. What do they know that you've forgotten? What choices have they made that you feared to make? This version of you is not fantasy. It is the potential you made real in another stream of time. By observing them, you begin to align with their vibration. Another powerful method is dream incubation. Before going to sleep, write down a question or request in a journal. Show me another life where I am thriving. Place the journal beside your bed and repeat the intention aloud or silently as you drift off. Dreams are one of the most direct pathways between dimensions, and your request sends a signal to your deeper consciousness. You may not receive an answer immediately, but with repetition, the dreams will begin to change. Characters will speak with more purpose. Scenarios will repeat. You may find yourself returning to the same places or waking with a deep emotional memory you cannot explain. Keep track of these dreams. Over time, patterns will emerge, and in those patterns are messages from your other selves. Meditation is perhaps the most reliable gateway, but it requires patience. Unlike visualization, which engages the mind actively, meditation quiets the mind, creating a space in which subtle impressions can arise. Choose a simple breath-focused meditation. Then introduce a light intention. I am open to receiving insight from my parallel selves. Do not chase thoughts. Do not expect visions. Instead, watch for emotional shifts, energetic sensations, or sudden images that pass like clouds. Often the connection begins as a feeling, a warm presence, a quiet knowing, a sudden shift in perspective. That feeling is the signature of another self brushing against your awareness. You don't need to figure it out. Just receive it. The more you trust, the clearer the connection becomes. Journaling can also help solidify these experiences. After a visualization, meditation, or dream, immediately write what you experienced, even if it seems unclear. Ask your other self questions. What should I know right now? What would you do in my situation? Then allow the pen to move without judgment. You might be surprised by the answers that emerge. This is a form of channeling, not from an external spirit, but from part of yourself that holds wisdom you've yet to access in this life. Another technique is embodiment. Once you've made contact with a powerful parallel self, someone confident, calm, creative, or clear, you can begin to embody their energy in daily life. This doesn't mean pretending or acting. It means aligning. Ask yourself, how would that version of me walk into this room? How would they speak in this conversation? What decision would they make today? Bit by bit, you begin to live into the timeline they represent. You merge with them through action, not just awareness. And as you do, life begins to rearrange itself around your new frequency. If the idea of connecting with your other selves feels overwhelming, remember this: the relationship is mutual. They want to meet you. They are, in fact, versions of you seeking your help as much as you are seeking theirs. You may be the more awakened one in this stream. You may be the healing version, the brave one, the catalyst. You are not a passive recipient of multidimensional wisdom. You are an active participant in the evolution of your entire soul network. Ritual and intention setting can also enhance this connection. You might light a candle and say, "Tonight I invite the presence of my highest parallel self." Or you might create a small altar with items that remind you of different aspects of your being, symbols of courage, peace, creativity, or love. The physical ritual helps anchor the energetic intention. The outer act invites the inner response. For those drawn to esoteric practice, exploring the Akashic records can also be transformative. Whether through guided sessions or meditative journeys, accessing the Akashic field allows you to witness lifetime's choices and energetic patterns that span beyond the veil. The records do not exist in a library somewhere in the sky. They are vibrationally encoded in your soul's field, and with practice, you can learn to read them not as history, but as living guidance. Above all, trust your own experience. Society often teaches us to distrust the inner world, to doubt what we cannot prove, to silence the voices within. But those inner voices may be echoes from other lives. Those sudden insights may be transmissions from your future self. That gut feeling may be the survival instinct of a version of you who walked into danger once and never returned. These are not fantasies. They are data from the greater system of who you are. As your connection to your parallel selves deepens, you may begin to feel less alone. You may sense a counsel around you, not of angels or guides, but of yous, different, wiser, bolder, or even wounded versions of yourself offering companionship on the road. In listening to them, you learn more about the complexity of your soul. In guiding them, you reclaim the wholeness you've always carried. Part 9, you are more than one life. Conclusion, some truths are not meant to be proven first, but felt. Deep in your chest, in the quiet between thoughts, in the tremble that arises when you meet someone, and just know when you walk into a room and feel like you've been there before, when your heart aches for a memory that doesn't belong to this life, you feel it. The soul is not singular. You are not singular. You are a vast network of selves woven across timelines and dimensions, each carrying a different expression of your essence. And together they form you, not the you see in the mirror, but the deeper eternal self watching it all unfold. We have been conditioned to think of life as linear, one birth, one death, one story with a beginning, middle, and end. But what if life is not a line, but a sphere, an expanding field of choices, experiences, and timelines all happening at once? What if every decision you've made and every decision you didn't make still lives embodied by versions of you playing out those paths in parallel worlds? And what if those versions of you are not distant shadows, but active participants in your emotional, mental, and even physical reality? The signs have always been there. That flash of familiarity when you meet a stranger, that unshakable fear with no clear origin, that dream that returns night after night, feeling more like memory than fantasy. Those spontaneous moments of clarity, of déjà vu, of insight that seems to come from nowhere. They are not accidents. They are threads. And when you begin to follow those threads, a tapestry unfolds, a multidimensional portrait of who you really are. You are not the sum of one life. You are the convergence point of many, a warrior in one realm, a healer in another, a mother, a teacher, a wanderer, a version of you who never lost faith, and a version of you who still carries the wound. Some of yourselves are waiting for you to remember them. Others are already helping you from behind the veil. You have been whispering to yourself across dimensions for a long time, and now you are finally listening. The purpose of this awareness is not to escape this life or to glorify the other timelines. This life is sacred. This timeline is real. But it is not the only one. And when you begin to live with that knowing not just as an idea, but as a felt truth, something extraordinary happens. You become whole. You begin to act with the wisdom of many lives. You forgive more easily. You trust more deeply. You sense that your struggles are not isolated and neither are your victories. Every step you take here reverberates across realities. Every act of courage ripples outward, offering strength to the selves who need it most. Living as a multidimensional being doesn't require you to abandon logic or embrace fantasy. It simply asks you to expand your sense of what is real, to listen to your inner world as attentively as your outer one, to pay attention to patterns, dreams, intuition, and resonance, not as noise, but as messages. Life is speaking to you on many channels. You just have to tune in. So what does this mean for your day-to-day life? It means that your choices matter more than you know. That when you choose to heal, to grow, to love yourself, you are not just changing your own story, you are sending healing across timelines. You are breaking cycles not just for yourself, but for every version of you who has ever felt trapped, silenced, or small. You become the convergence point, the catalyst, the remembrance. It also means you are never truly alone. Even in your most isolated moments, you are surrounded by echoes of yourself, some reaching out for guidance, others offering it freely. You can call upon them, learn from them, merge with them. And when you do, you will find that the strength you thought you lacked has always been within you, lived, practiced, embodied elsewhere, simply waiting for you to claim it. The journey into parallel lives is not about control. It is about integration. It is not about knowing everything. It is about remembering enough to feel whole. The mind may never fully grasp it, but the soul already knows. And in trusting that knowing, you step into your full identity, not as a single thread, but as the entire web. You are the dreamer and the dreamed, the creator and the created, the question and the answer. You are the unfolding of possibilities, the sum of 1,000 choices made and unmade. You are the present moment shaped by all that you've ever been and all that you still are, somewhere in a version of reality, just one breath away. So walk through this life with presence, but also walk with reverence for the unseen parts of you that have fought battles you'll never remember, loved people you'll never meet, and learned lessons that now live in your bones. Honor them, speak to them, learn from them. Let their wisdom rise through your words, their courage reflect in your eyes, because they are you, and together you are becoming whole. You are not one life, you are a chorus, a constellation, a soul in motion across time, across space, across all that ever was and ever will be. And now that you remember this, you will never be the same.